Welcome to Vets to PM's Military Transition Academy podcast, the show where we discuss how to succeed in transitioning from the military service to the civilian workforce. This show and the academy it represents helps veterans transition into meaningful, lucrative post-service careers. Your primary host is Eric Doc Wright, PhD, certified manager, military veteran, serial founder, best-selling business author, philosopher, linguist, and coach. Your other host is Jeremy Burdick, project management professional, scrum master, product owner, and retired Air Force chief, and the current COO of Vets to PM and the Professional Development Unit University, where we will interview veterans successful in corporate America and business to bring you nuggets of wisdom every episode to make you more successful. Next, let's introduce today's guest. Our guest today is Barry, and he's a two-time veteran, Navy and Army, and recently retired in July of 2022 after 23 years of service to the nation. He was a Seaman Apprentice in the United States Navy and served as the U.S. Army as both an infantry and military intelligence officer. He recently pivoted into cybersecurity with a focus on insider risk and is a senior consultant with Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud. Hard work, teamwork, respect, and determination guide his actions. One of the most valuable lessons that has come from his experience is that a clear vision and teamwork are the facilitators of success, and that growth happens through investing in each other's thoughts and progress. He has been married for 20 years and has 3 boys, which means he has no nice furniture, and he enjoys learning, reading, and working out during his free time. Let's get started.
Navy first, Army second, retired out of the Army. He's a Texan. He's down there with you. Did DOD skill bridge and crushed it, and was just telling a story about, in fact, he called to get a referral from his boss, and his boss said, "Hey, I'll do you one better, man. How about I hire you back?" So that's what he was just talking about. So how cool is that, right?
Is it a paramilitary organization that you get hired back to then?
No, we were kind of talking about that's actually a cybersecurity company. So my background was Intel, and primarily like straight up all source intelligence. So I was an intelligence officer, but during like the last 10 years of my career, my specialty, even though I didn't do it a lot, was counter intel. But that naturally when I was doing my career triangulation, I really enjoyed the intelligence part, and specifically counterintelligence, with kind of countering the threats that are trying to get our information, and found out, well, where can I do this in the civilian sector? And then found insider threat within cybersecurity. So that's what led me there. But
and you retired in July, right?
Yep. Just in July. July 1st was the official retirement date. So
that's a heck of a beard for that short of time. Well done.
Yeah. So I started in July. It's like my wife hates it, but I love it because I can't grow anything up top. So it's like I gotta do something. Like I got to be able to style and work on it. Plus, it's a mandatory thing that I'm noticing with a lot of veterans, right? We don't get to grow that facial hair out. I guess sometimes we do, though, if we get to, because we can say, say that, I'm a Viking and I can grow that now sometimes. And that's one thing that's kind of cool too, with like the way that the military is changing. I was going to mention it. I don't know if you guys heard, but kind of a positive thing from the Army is they're actually changing the policy of when you can drop your retirement paperwork. So I haven't read all the stipulations, but it's like starts January 1st, as I understand it. And so if you're 18 years or more, you can actually drop your retirement paperwork at 2 years out now. So I think that's a good thing. I think we just got to hold our leaders accountable and make sure that they don't try to game the system, because a loss is a loss when it comes to, managing personnel. But I'm hoping what the Army does is kind of set up something to where, they can not put the unit at a detriment, but still help out our transitioning veterans and really set them up for success. Because that's really the nexus behind this change, as I understand it.
Yeah, there's a like immediately I'm thinking to myself, and I haven't read it, so I have no idea, but I'm like, okay, is it positive? Is it negative? There's probably some really large pros to it.
Yeah.
There's equally some negatives to it. So What if you get promoted, or if you would have got promoted and it's like, hey, I would have stayed if I'd have got that stripe or that next rank. And you pull yourself out of it because once you drop retirement papers, now you're ineligible. And life tends to happen when we're not really, we can make our best plans, but life tends to happen. I can guarantee you every single enlistment, about a year before I was going to re-enlist, something would happen. Either I'd have another child, some idiots would slam, airplanes into the trade center or trade towers there. Things would just happen. And so I almost think that's for the or even for the planners, like the really far out planners.
Yep.
The only pro I see to it is for the assignments people. Like,
there's that, I think, but I do think it helps people kind of just line up stuff too. Hopefully, again, like if a unit's able to really guard them from stuff and let them, do training, because that's like a big thing. I know, like I always felt like I was behind the power curve, because I kind of, you were talking about life happens, and that's so true. Because I was all looking, I wanted to command, right? I wanted to command a battalion. I was an alternate 2 years in the running, but I never got the call up off the bench. I was like, put me in, coach, I'm ready, but never got the call. So I started looking at, what else can I do to continue to serve and get some fulfillment and give back to the Army. And there was actually an opportunity to go be a professor of military science back like almost like an hour north of my hometown in South Dakota. So I could have went to the School of Mines and Technology. I was on the path to do it. I had actually sent an acceptance letter, sent an introduction to the dean there at the school. But my wife and I just kind of started looking at everything, life projection, where we wanted to end up. And then like my body, the military's hard on you. So my body was starting to tell me too, like, probably, again, you say stuff happens and sometimes you don't listen to it. Right. So I always say, like, I probably should have retired about 10 years to 5 years ago because of like the wear and tear on my body. Like I was always the person out there in the runs doing the funky chicken, right? Because of like the overcompensation for all the bumps and bruises in our bodies. But yeah, just crazy. But I decided like very quickly, hey, I guess it's time to hang it up. And we decided, that's when I started. So I got to back up a little bit because that was like at December of 21 when I decided to do that finally. So it was like, I put that paperwork in there that next summer to retire, the following summer, that year out, and drop my paperwork. But it was like I had about 18 months to plan. But even then I was like, I felt rushed. And I had a great unit, because normally it doesn't happen where they kind of like let you do stuff for yourself. It's usually like, no, you're still running, you're in the gates. And especially when you're managing people, but I was able to balance all that and had a great chain of command that supported me and allowed me to do stuff for me, but I still felt like I was behind the power curve. So that's one thing, like too, when I think about like this new, thing for the Army, is like, it could be good because then it allows hopefully people to protect them and give them some space and time to really concentrate on them. Because I knew I had training to do. Because, again, I was going from, and that was the thing too, for my transition, I didn't want to be a manager anymore. I wanted to be a doer, and I wanted to understand more of the technical, because I already understood cybersecurity somewhat, and especially when it comes to counterintelligence, insider threat, but I needed to beef myself up on more of the technical side, because I was going to be an individual contributor now, and that's what I wanted to do. So I had to invest in, that time to do all that work. So that was important to me, but man, I felt like I was behind.
And even with that said, that's why, I'm stoked that Jeremy and I do the podcast, and Barry, guys like you come on and gals come on and chat with them. Cause I mean, if you're out there listening, and even if you're, cause you hear that almost every veteran we ever talk to says, hey, you can't start early enough.
Yeah.
You're still in uniform. You still got a career. You still got daily duties in uniform, but there is no exit event that's an
No.
immersive event that's going to teach you the new norms, the new customs, the new courtesies, the new, hey, stop knife hand. And like, so thank goodness for LinkedIn these days, and, networking and things like that, this podcast. I mean,
Yeah.
so even if you can't formally start to transition out, you can start thinking about, okay, when Uncle Sugar's not leading and directing and telling me what I'm going to do next or where I'm going to go next, what am I going to do next? Where am I going to go next? What, like you said, hey, I think I know an industry I want to go into, but what are the technical chops? You start connecting with those people, you start figuring that out. So
Yeah.
even if you're not going to formally plan, you still can listen to things like this podcast and network on LinkedIn and whatever, and start going to industry events, reading industry trade publications, so that you can figure out what you want to do next. Because 2 years will, like you said, man, 2 years goes faster than you think. I mean,
and I had a tentative plan too, or at least was like, hey, I think within the next 3 to 5 years, I'm probably going to be, at my horizon. But it comes fast. And, as a planner, I was made that way, trained that way through my whole career, but still it's like you have audibles, but still it's like Jeremy was saying, life intervenes when you least expect it, or you see different opportunities and just ways to do different, to provide and feel fulfilled and give back. But the other thing I thought was interesting too, that I was kind of smiling about, like the knife hand, there is something like, you gotta become a civilian. You operate different. It's more like leading through influence, I think, is like the best thing I've heard, rather than like you automatically have the rank or like, there's a rank structure. It's a hierarchy. It's not like that always in the business world. And it's a lot more through influence. So there is something to be said about, like, that's part of your transition too, is just learning how to operate differently and think differently. And that is the great thing, I think, about reaching out to people on LinkedIn early, even if you're still in, and like getting back, because I got consumed by work. That was my job. In any time I had, I tried to make for my family, because you're always trying to find balance. We're still all trying to find it constantly, I think, and do better at that, with managing, time between family and work and all that and other commitments. But the thing I'll say is it just takes a lot in talking to people. I think helped me kind of like transition and learn to operate anyways. Although I'd like to think that, I listen to my people a lot anyways, and led a lot more through influence. And I've heard that a lot from people, and, and we started later on in my career getting like a lot of feedback. We did like those multi-source assessment 360. So you actually hear feedback from your peers, your subordinates, your superiors. And I did hear that. So that was good to hear. But as part of DoD Skill Bridge too, that kind of helped me like transition back into civilian life. And that's the other beauty that I don't think is talked enough about with like Skill Bridge and other transitioning opportunities like that, is like, yeah, it gets your foot in the door, but it helps you like become a civilian again too. It gives you that soft landing. So I think that's an awesome part of like these transition programs that are out there. And the other thing too was like that I'll touch on, that you talked about, Doc, was, not knowing necessarily what you want to do. I was like, hey, I'll hit the easy button and I'll go be a program manager. But I started talking to program managers and was like, I don't know if I want to do that right away. So I was like, I don't know if that sounds too fun right now. I want to do something else. So, again, that's what guided me a different route, just because I did that soul searching and that triangulation that I was kind of talking about earlier, right? I listed out what were my likes about my job, what were my dislikes, and then kind of like, what do I want? So I had like, those three, then, get the Venn diagram out, make my three little circles. That last one was kind of like, what do I want out of my personal life? And I kind of tried to see what was in the center there of the positive things. And then that kind of led me down to searching and reaching out to people that were in these industries. So I went out, I found people in an insider threat and talked to them. And I reached out to a lot of veterans, but the thing that was beautiful too is like I was reaching out to a lot of just civilians that had no idea, really had, they maybe had a friend or somebody in their family that was in the service, but for the most part didn't know a lot about veterans. But man, like I was one that was kind of against like reaching out to people, because we're kind of self-sufficient, right? In the military, there's probably some a little bit of like our what am I trying to say, like the pride is a big part of it. I think there's a little bit of pride in there, but I was blown away by the amount of people that were willing to help, just by reaching out. I think you show how genuine you are, and people will just they'll flock to that, and they will help you out. So I would say like the network that I created, because I started out with like maybe 50 connections on LinkedIn, but they were all like military buddies. Maybe a few friends that I knew from high school that were out there in the civilian world, but those informational interviews, reaching out to those people, and just hearing what their job was about and being like, could I do that? Do I think I could do that? Would I want to do that?
Yeah.
Helped out immensely.
So let's kind of unpack a little bit of the triangulation / gap analysis. So tactically, for the listeners out there, what would you say they need to do? Like, just give them a 1, 2, 3 step process that they can start down that path that you took, that'll help them tomorrow or the next day.
Yeah. So that's a good question, because I know you can Google it and find numerous ways to do it. But I think like step 1 is do it. And it's like, put time on your calendar, block off time to do some introspection and really look at, and really evaluate what you liked and what you didn't like. I think that's like the biggest things. What did you like and what didn't you like about what you were doing? Those are probably the 2 biggest things.
Yeah.
So it's like,
sometimes we don't even know what we like and dislike.
Yep.
What you said was kind of golden earlier. Like, you're so busy professionally, that you're doing what you're told, and it does one of 2 things. You realize you hate it, or you embrace it and begin to like it. But innately, maybe it wasn't what you wanted to be when you grew up, but you just want to be good at what you do. Like, everybody shows up to work wanting to be good at what they do until you get crushed and depressed. So I like it. It sounds really simple. Take some time, figure out what you like.
Yeah.
But figure out what you really like, like not what you've been told to like.
Yep.
What you really want to wake up and do tomorrow or the next day or the next year or the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So,
it really does sound simple too, but it's not.
It
isn't. Yeah, because it's like, again, life happens. It's busy. It's a busy place. There's lots going on. There's a lot of distractions, and you have to make time for yourself to do that.
Right.
I always try to do that, and reflect and make some time to reflect. Cause I know, like when I went to Command and General Staff College for like 9 months, they say you get to decompress, but it's like, for me, that was like the best time. It's like, I got to learn a lot while I was there and planning and get ready for the next steps about being a field grade officer and a future leader, and pick some of that up, and think about Army design methodology. But like the big part of it was, as I had more time to just kind of sit there and reflect on the things I had done over like the past 10 years and slow down and think about like some of those things. So that's a huge part of, I think, just overall what people need to really think about when you hear triangulation or something like that, is take the time to reflect on what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you want. Like, what do you want to do? And like, that's part of, I think it feeds into so many other things within transition too, and like reflection, and like you hear about branding, because I think, again, all those will help you get to like, what really is my why? Like, what drives me? And that's another thing, like we don't think about, and people hear about branding and think it's like this, it kind of is like a niche term, but it's like, really, that's what it is. Finding out, like, really, who am I? And sometimes we don't do that. And sometimes you don't, we're always growing as people and humans, but like, it's an important thing again, to like think about like what really drives me. And I think it's like, it's powerful when you start to figure that out, and I know for me, it's like, it's helping people, protect data, and really that's like what has always been kind of like the baseline. And even my service, like that's why I served, was because I felt like, yeah, I wanted to serve my nation, but I wanted to serve the people. And service is a big part of that. And like, being in intelligence and in counterintelligence, it was always about protecting people when it came down to it. So like, that was like my why. And that's what's kind of still led me down a very similar path, not exactly the same, but very similar.
Barry, you hear, like you said, I mean, you hear branding all over LinkedIn and Wired and Inc.com and whatever. And you're like, wow, what is that? And they probably didn't teach it to you at your schoolhouses and command and staff college. They probably don't teach it to you in TAPS. And so what I tell folks is just, who are you? What do you want to do? Why do you want to do that? And what value does it bring somebody who would care? Right? Because not everybody's going to care. So for the people who care, what's your signal that you're sending through the market? So like I mean, just in a brief time of meeting you. So, hey, I'm a guy who served, who wants to continue serving. I use my curiosity, my problem solving, and my sense of service to secure your data so your organization maintains profitability and competitive advantage, or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Like then the civilians, like, and the branding, so to speak, flows from that. There's your story. I know who you are. I know why you do what you do. I know what you do, and I know what I get out of that relationship.
Yeah. That little piece
that you just subordinates that, you're good to go.
Yeah, that little piece you just broke out there too is like, I mean, that goes into your elevator pitch when you're meeting people or you're going into an interview, and then it's genuine. Again, it's like, that's the beauty of it. You take the time to do all this stuff. It's like, it's natural. It's like, it's right there. And then you're not like deer in the headlight thinking about like reflecting during an interview or meeting someone, when it's like, because people can sense that too. They're like, well, they just don't quite know what they want to do. They can be a great person, but it's just, it helps you immensely.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of talked a little bit too about quality and networking and taking it from the 50 people to more that are outside of your natural job, right? So the person that you just served with 5 or 6 years or whatever else is likely not going to be the person who hires you professionally on the outside.
Yeah.
Unless they've gotten out ahead of you, so I mean, it could happen, but it's just unlikely. So what are some of the tips and tricks that you used to build a quality network?
Yep. And that's the key word right there. It's quality. Like, some people will, I think, get into going over the top, maybe a little bit too much with branding and thinking about building my network. So it's just like blindly clicking on people. So quality is the key right there. It's like, who else do I think like I could hopefully help them out and bring value to their network too? Because it shouldn't be all about me, right? It should be like a real relationship. And that's like, we're all people. So don't forget about that, and we want to help each other out for the most part. I think, like, everybody wants to be successful, but hopefully it's not at the detriment of somebody else, but yeah, quality is like the biggest thing. And then finding people in your industry. And again, like, that was one thing I had to unlearn too, going back to not being maybe a believer in LinkedIn. I mean, I was on Facebook a little bit, but I wasn't a big social butterfly. And I don't go on Facebook a whole lot more. I find more value, I think, in LinkedIn too, because I've built that quality network, and I find more that drives me. And it fills my cup more, I get more fulfillment out of it. There's detractors there, and there's some negativity, but for the most part, it's pretty upbeat, positive. Facebook, maybe Twitter, maybe not so much anymore. But it seems to be a lot more kind of openness and building people up. And that's the thing too, is like, I think, again, with networking, and it's kind of hard virtually, right? But but you got to try to find the right people. And it is just about, I think, again, I think it goes back to what we talked about before, and like that analysis and that reflection of what do you want? What do you want to be? What do you want out of life in the future? And that should drive kind of like your connections and the people that you want to meet. And I branch out, right? Like, I don't just stay within cybersecurity, but I find like-minded people that have the right drive, that are positive. And especially like with, I still reach out to veterans. It's not like I stay away from veterans anymore, because like I reach out because I want to give back. And I've been trying to make more time too. And that's really one of the reasons why I came on here, is because I wanted to give back. Because people will, they can take take the good, drop the bad that they don't like out of this podcast or whatever. And I think that's like all engagements that you have with people. It's like we all can learn something from each other. Whether it's good or bad, we can all learn from that, right? We can learn from negatives too. Like, hey, I don't want to go that way, or I don't want to do that.
For sure.
So that's a good thing. But it came down to, like, for me, a personal thing, going back to your original question about how did I navigate it? It's like, I think I have maybe around like 2,000 connections or so. I'm not positive, but it's like most of the time, the people I reach out to, again, are the people that I want to connect with. And then like those that are reaching out to me, same thing applies, but it comes down to me individually. I'm not just like one that's just going out to like build the number, right? To me, it's more deeper, and to me, it should be quality, because that will be more valuable to you, I think, in the end.
Yeah. Two major points that you brought up, I like that stood out to me from what you were just saying, is a connection can't be lopsided. You can't always be the guy that asks for the favor. Like after so many favors, you kind of wore out the teeter-totter, and now you're way at the bottom, and there's just no way to get back up. So I guess as a good piece of advice, offer value to your connections.
Yeah.
If it's always just you asking, need, and then you're probably going to get, ignored.
Yep.
But the other thing was, not staying within a silo of just one place. If you're a car, you need a lot of different parts to make it go, right? You need tires, you need an engine, you need the body of the car, you need gasoline for it. So, I mean, the whole idea of sticking in one industry area seems a little, at first, like that's good. It's good. Penetrate deep into that career field, but then branch out so that you have a wider view of what people need and what they value, so that you can offer value. You can't offer value if you don't understand what they value. So,
yeah. And then like we said many times, life is going to happen. So maybe you find out like, hey, maybe I want to go a different route. And then there's a path open to that. Where, like, again, from these connections and even the discussions and giving back with people, you might figure out, hey, maybe that's something I want to do. Maybe I want more of that.
Yeah.
And maybe I can, add value to that person or that organization, that other path that I didn't see.
Yeah, I agree. I got to be honest with you. I mean, after serving 20 plus years, I don't know that I knew what I wanted to do. In fact, I definitely did not know. I knew that I did not know what I liked and disliked.
Yeah, that's what I think I was pretty much too, until I really started taking time to do that reflection. And I still don't. And I still tease about that. Like, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
Because it really is just a journey. Life is a journey. I mean, people say that all the time, but there's a reason for it, man. There's a big reason for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. Doc, what are you thinking?
And that's key too, Barry. So this triangulation, this networking, these things, and that's what's cool about this, gang, is these skills are, yes, they're perishable, but you're going to use them again. I mean, I can tell you 2 different services. The second time I left service, 2003, I've been like 7 completely different professions since then.
Yeah.
But every single one of them, it's like, hey, why do I want to go to this next profession? Cool. What are the pros? What are the cons? How am I going to bring value? What skill sets have I developed in the past that I can leverage in this future role? So that again, you can give that your why, as you were mentioning, Barry, and you just lather, rinse, and repeat, man. Hey, I want to be a business professor. Cool. What's a professor do? What are they like? What's a day in their life like? Cool. What makes a good one? What makes a bad one? Cool. How do I be a business owner? Cool. How do I be a DoD civil servant? How do I completely disparate fields?
Yep. Yeah. How do I start my own business and do something completely different that I didn't even know?
You're still in sprint mode.
Yeah.
You're constantly just sprinting. Got to take care of my primary duties. Got to take care of my additional duties. Got to take care of my people. It's like those three things are always on your mind. And then,
that's
like
that's a hard thing too. There, you talk about, like, for me, again, like being so, like, having that underlying, thing of service in my people and taking care of my people. Man, that was kind of a hard thing to do, because again, it's like you have to create time for yourself, and you're not used to that.
No.
So it's like I really had to focus on that. And our TAPS program is good. Not all TAPS are created equal. Again, it depends on who's running the programs, and they do have like a curriculum that they have to follow, but it comes down to people and how they manage their program. So you can have some good ones and some bad ones. And ours was a good one, but it's like, it's just too much darn information to cram into 3 days. And it's like good military training, right? That's what we do. We schedule like a 2-hour block of instruction. That's probably supposed to be about 2 weeks. But that's the way it works. But so again, you got to find supplemental things and add that into your kit bag and make it be a forcing function for you too. Because then again, it's like you can hopefully have some leadership that's understanding and discuss with them. And that's the other thing I'll say right there too, is like, I was open and honest with, my G2. I mean, 06, great guy. Gus Moskovsky, if any of you have ever run across him, he's an American Panamanian guy. He grew up in Panama, and actually, surprisingly, great story. He knew like my second aunt and uncle and cousins that used to run around there in Panama. So we had some history that we didn't even really know about. But early on, when I knew, like, I felt that change, that, hey, I was going to be, retiring, I went up and I had that honest discussion with him. I got some time on his calendar, sat in his office and said, hey, sir, it's time for me to hang it up. And it's like, here's my plan. I went in there with a solid plan. And I think that's one thing you do too, that will actually, set well with you, is like, if you have a solid plan. I had a timeline laid out. Planner. I had my little Excel spreadsheet with a calendar and showed him and did the backwards planning of like, these are the things that I need to do. Training, here's my terminal leave, walk that all out for him. So he didn't have to think about it, but showed him I had a solid plan, and it helped him like think about already in the future too. Like, how could he protect the organization, help me out, but protect the organization to carry on without me, that being such a big impact. And again, taking care of me. So, so that's a big thing too. I would tell people is plan that out. And again, that's like why it goes back to, like, sometimes like 2 years sounds like a long time, but it's not, because you gotta sit there and be deliberate about it. Because that's the key to the success, right? And some of the, again, the hard work that people don't see are all those little planning things that you have to do. And it all takes time.
Yeah.
Time is not infinite.
Right. No, I agree. I think the uniqueness there is you planned it, but then you showed it to your boss.
Yeah.
So that he could help you. Cause we all want to, I mean, you're not wearing the cloth because all of a sudden, you don't want to go be a millionaire, or you want to leverage people for your dominance. I mean, it's a service industry. We are there to serve others. Sometimes people just don't know how to help the other, people in their command. For example, every commander doesn't understand that, hey, I need to give this person time to, one, figure out what they want to do, and then two, to go do it. So it's the deliberateness. And I like the way you put that, the deliberate planning and then the deliberate execution of your plan to see what then happens. That's the only way you're going to know if it was a good plan or a bad plan. You got to start working it somewhere. Before we get too far, I do want to bring back, you said something that early on in the show that was the importance of informational interviews. Unpack that just a little bit for me.
Yeah. So, again, I started out and I was like, hey, I want to be a program manager. So I started like researching online, like most would do, reached out to Mr. Google and kind of seeing like, what does that entail? What training does it entail? I actually started down the path. I think I got like 2 hours into some training I found through some free training online. And I was like, let's put a pause on this. I need to talk to some more people. So then I started reaching out to some folks online, again, through my connections that I had reached out to. Some of them were people I had already made connections with. And then some of them were people that I, continued to like, go out and find. And again, like, looking at that quality and people that I wanted to connect with. And it wasn't only because like, going back to like, I wanted to reach out to that person just because I knew they were a program manager. It was usually like, again, I looked at them from a broader perspective. Can I bring value to them potentially in the future? Can they bring value to me? And do I like what I see? I go through and I look, that's the intelligence officer in me too. I'd go on, I'd look on their profile, see if I liked the message they were sending, look at some of the comments they had made. And then like once I started feeling like this is not what I wanted to do, then I was like, well, okay, there's one indicator right there. I don't want to do this. What do I want to do? And that was like the door or the elephant in the room. I finally saw it and I was like, man, I don't know what I want to do. So then it made me focus on, okay, what do I want to do? So then it led me down cybersecurity. And I started doing that triangulation because that was something too. When I was in college, I took a computer class and I actually liked it. It was just like, binary languages and programming and stuff like that. So it wasn't necessarily cybersecurity, but it was something I had always kind of been interested in. And I'd always touched on the fringes of it in intelligence anyways. But then I was like, okay, cybersecurity is like saying you want to go into the medical field. And that's a big thing too, is like, when you're finding out about these different industries, you got to figure out like, what is it all about? Because there's like all these different, some people will think IT and cybersecurity are the same things. Well, no, they're complementary, but they're not the same things. And that's something too, like going down this path of reaching out to your connections and doing informational interviews that do that job. You can find out what does it entail. And then like it's a teaching moment for you too, because you get to figure out, well, what is it exactly? And what does it entail? And then the other thing that's beautiful about it is when you're talking to these folks, they can usually hear like what your interests are too, and be like, hey, maybe you want to consider X, Y, or Z, or like based on your background. Cause like, again, sometimes we don't know what value we have in our kit belt, right? The things that we learned in the military that we can bring to whatever organization. That was like a big part of it too, was for me was I knew I had a lot of things I could bring to the table, a lot of soft skills, and I'm a people person, and but it's like, what are actually the technical skills? I had to sit back and really look at that too. Like what translates into the civilian world? And there was actually a lot, right? I didn't think there was, but there was a lot. And again, like from talking to these people and building these relationships, people get to know you. And that's how I got into like Mandiant in the first place and got my skill bridge opportunity, because I had been in conversation with this guy that was an insider threat, Johnny Collins. He's at a completely different company now, but great guy. He was he just a regular civilian, didn't know me from anybody else, reached out and we would just talk. And he ended up, first he was a coach, then he became a mentor, then he became a sponsor. And that's another thing too, that people, there's differences there, right? There's like the coaches that they just sit there and tell you like, hey, you got to take this ball, and when you're running to the right sideline, make sure that ball is in your right hand when you're running the sweep or whatever, so that you're protecting the ball. So there's that. But then there's the mentors, right, that start to kind of like say, well, if you want to do X, Y, or Z. They can help you kind of like set stuff up, and they start to help and hold you accountable. And coaches do that too. They can help hold you accountable, but there's usually more of a connection there. But it's again, it's like those people, it's a relationship. It starts to develop. And then like when sponsorship comes, and this is something like they talk about in 4 Block too, where it like really dawned on me, because I'd never really heard it put this way, is like, then sponsorship, you don't know when sponsorship happens. It just happens. That's usually like when somebody finds value in you, and they know you well enough that they're gonna take a bullet for you, or they're gonna like take, they're gonna put their name on the line, and they're gonna vouch for you, and you will never know it if they do that. Because that's like, to me, that's like that aha moment when you've like created a great connection. Again, like all back to like the information, this all happened because of an informational interview. One of many, like I so many people I could talk about that have just been awesome and great helps during my transition. But it was because of that, and that relationship that we developed with Johnny, and I was sitting there still struggling to find an insider threat position within SkillBridge to where I could actually like get some real world experience. And again, like see, how do my skills and in everything and experience translate into the civilian sector? What does it actually mean? And then I can actually learn, do I really want to do this as well? But it was, we had been talking for probably about 3 months, 3 or 4 months. And it was just like an email out of the blue. He was like, hey, have you found a SkillBridge position yet? And he had a little smiley face emoji on there. I remember it. And then I was like, nope. And he's like, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so. They're in HR. Reach out to them. We want to bring you on as a SkillBridge intern. And that's like how that started, right? So again, that's the thing, like about the informational interview, just there's people out there, talk to them, and ask them, have questions lined up of what you want to talk about. Don't just, you can go in there blind, but I would say have like a solid, 3 to 5 questions that you want to talk about. Start with that and then build on that, get more questions. And don't let it end there, right? If they have time and they want to invest in you, reach back out to them, or reach out to others and ask them, or ask some people the same questions, because maybe you want to get validation that, somebody wasn't just like real positive about this part, because that's something that they liked. Again, it's got to be like what you like and what you want.
And you're going to have questions for the real interviews, right?
Yeah.
So when the chips are down and you're interviewing for a position, you're going to have questions. So that's a good thing to ask your contacts too. Hey, what are some good, valid questions that hiring managers, folks like you sitting on the other side of the desk, want to know about in an interview?
Yep.
They can give you answers to the test, man.
Yeah, they can. And then the other thing too is like, once you get into that dialogue in an interview, it becomes like more of a dialogue. You're going to get those questions toward the end, maybe, or maybe they'll throw you a curveball, but they're going to ask you questions too. Hey, do you have any questions of me? So it helps to develop that skill too, with having those, that dynamic conversation and kind of thinking like, okay, this is the industry I want to go into. You're already going to start to develop like some questions for that manager that through information interviews and this research that you've been doing. Like, again, what's important to me? What do I want to see if this organization or this manager that I could potentially be working for, am I gonna potentially reach that goal and objective in their organization?
Yeah, great point. Not so much to unpack, but I'm loving the informational interviews as a preparation for the real interview.
Yeah.
Use your time with these experts that you've spent time finding. They've given up their time.
Yeah.
They're giving you value, and so harness that and put that into your professional, repertoire, whether you got a spiral or you put it in your phone. Great questions to ask during an interview. It makes such a big difference. But as we start to wrap this up, you got a book.
Yeah, so it's a transition book. And
Okay.
just what you said, I still have it.
Yep.
I mean, I put that stuff in here and I refer to it because you're not going to remember.
So
And that was the other thing. Like I had a transition book.
for people that are just listening, he held up the military, greenback style book with all of his little notes in there. So I love it.
Yeah.
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 And you can't beat that, right? As we run through this, is there anything that tactically someone needs to start tomorrow that you would say, hey, let's get after it? Where would they start? What would be the first couple things that you might say?
Number one, I would usually say find your why. What drives you? Because I think like you really do that inner search of like what actually drives you. Not and then sometimes that doesn't actually mean like what do I want to do in a career? No, like it's like what drives you, what fills you, what fills your cup. And I think that goes a long way. And then I would say, a second thing would be plan it out, be deliberate about it. And then third, I would say, for somebody that was an intelligence and very, didn't like to be on social media a lot, break out of it. You can be careful. Like sometimes I probably still, I've broken some cardinal rules and probably opened up more than I should have and let a little bit more out online than I should. But, trust in folks, trust in people, and look for those quality connections, and ask good questions and bring value to their network, because you're going to get a lot out of it. And again, like the thing too that I forgot to mention when you said it was like those informational interviews. Yeah, it helps you prep for the interview, but it could be the interview too. You never know. Like from these discussions, like the bonds you can make with people, and it's like might just be like, yep, I want you on my team. And then the timing might not be right. Like I talked about, like I wanted to work for Mandiant. I actually didn't know, this is going to be funny. But I didn't know what Mandiant was when I originally like was again trying to figure out cybersecurity because I wasn't in the industry. And then like I find out like by accident, when I reached out to Johnny Collins who had worked there, I started like Googling it, and then it's like even Mandiant is low key, because you have to like really read in the like news headlines when these cybersecurity breaches and the like incident responders go out there, and there'll be just like a blip in there, like Mandiant intelligence helped out, or Mandiant consultants helped out doing what. It'll just be like a blip in there, but they're all over the place. But that was the thing too, is like it opened my mind and my view. And but like I kind of got off track there, but like I wanted to work for them. Like once I started figuring out like also like what the organization meant, and there's like a lot of veterans in this organization too, which I actually really like too, but I found out again by accident. I mean, the CEO is a former Air Force OSI agent, so I mean, right there should tell you something about, but they're like very mission focused. So again, like when I was looking for what I wanted in an organization, like their values spoke to me. And when I was doing the internship, it was like, okay, these guys and gals, they believe it. They're doing it and they're service oriented. I got that good feeling of like, I want to work here. I would love it. But like at the time, it's like, they didn't have, because the way it works in the business world, again, it's different. They just don't have infinite money, right? You've got to have contracts and customers in place to hire people. And that didn't necessarily pan out at the time. So I at the end of my 3 months, they're like, sorry, we want to hire you, but we don't have anything. And I thought that door had closed, but I took that break. I was with them from January to April 1st. I had a big break. And then like it was around June or July, I reached out to my old manager for a referral to a completely different job. And he's like, hey man, yeah, I'd love to refer you, but you want to come back to work for me. And by August 1st, I was back to doing it. And I'm like, this is my office. This is where I work from too. So that was another thing like I wasn't necessarily looking for, but it's beautiful. I love working from home. Some people don't like it, but and I do miss the human contact a little bit, but like like this is great too, like the podcasts and virtual networking and conferencing, like you can still get a lot from that. But yeah, you never know again where life is going to lead you. From all this stuff that we talked about, there's like beauty in all of it, and it's going to be valuable. It might not seem like it at the time, but it's going to pay off, and it's going to pay dividends, because again, it's like, I think Doc had said it, you're going to reuse these skills over and over again in numerous things throughout your transition.
For sure.
Yeah.
Man, that's great. Yeah, I need a notebook. Where is it? But Doc, any parting shots? Anything you want to bring up?
No, other than Barry, cool having you on the podcast, man. I mean, I knew when we were chatting beforehand digitally, I'm like, man, I wonder if he did come on the podcast, because, you know, that's it, and it never fails. I mean, like, you hear, hey, network, you hear, hey, figure out what you're going to do next. You hear, hey, find your why. But I don't know how many dozens and dozens and dozens of podcasts we've done now, Jeremy, but every single guest brings like a half a dozen nuggets of wisdom, you know what I mean, that are totally different, because Barry, it's your transition's completely different. And I was talking about this with a vet. We were having lunch last Friday, and one of the things I struggled with is the transition is not like a sprint. There's no finish line.
No, there isn't. It
I've
goes
been out
on
since 2003. You know what I mean? It took me a decade to transition, because you're literally transforming.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, when you learn those skills to, you know, you don't have to figure out what you want to be when you grow up now, because if you figure out that what you're doing isn't it, you just transform into something else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're critters, we adapt. So
yeah,
I really like the fresh eyes you brought to it.
Yeah, I mean, you can decide to become a lawyer at 50. You can do it.
We talked to one.
Yeah. Hopefully hopefully we live longer, right? But like, look at some of the average lifespan of people. It's like, you know, yeah, sometimes, you know, it's a rush. It's a rat race out there. Time is not infinite. But again, you can recreate yourself in like a short amount of time. It's like, you can do it. It's scary. It's scary because it takes time, it takes commitment and hard work, but you can do it.
Yeah, I love it. What a way to wrap it up. You know, deliberacy, hard work, takes time. I really appreciate you guys having me too. This was great. Like I said, my first one. I've actually been lined up to do a couple of these, but work or life would intervene. But I appreciate you guys having me on too, and giving me this opportunity to give back a little bit, and, you know, and flap my gums. I love to talk about this. I'm passionate about it. Hopefully that came through, and hopefully I gave value to people who listen to, and your listeners. For sure. I think you helped me. So I really appreciate the time we talked, and I look forward to talking again.
Yeah. We'll stay in touch. Definitely. I appreciate it again.
Cool. Thanks, Barry.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in and spending a bit of time with us at the Military Transition Academy, powered by Vets to PM. If we piqued your interest, but you want more details, please head over to the website vetstopm.com and see if we can help prepare you for a better tomorrow or a future meaningful and lucrative career.